Hey guys, today I want to talk about imposter syndrome. Um, it's an interesting topic for people on the spectrum because it generally cuts in two different directions. The obvious one is we're masking all the time, generally to fit in some way, shape, or form. And this goes again. I've said this before. This goes for everyone. The general population, everybody who interacts in society has to do some level of masking. Um, but what we're talking about here is a different level. This is like autistic masking. This is the masking that lets you fit in where before, um, usually by childhood, you have all sorts of indications that say when you're not masking, you're not fitting in. This is what you need to do to fit in. You learn to kind of mirror people. You learn to watch their behavior. Obviously, this can lead to some pretty significant imposter syndrome, um, because you can really easily lose yourself. But the other way that imposter syndrome comes is with your diagnosis. So for a lot of people, we weren't diagnosed until later in life. So I learned early that I had autism, but I self-assessed as a teenager. And that anyone who self-assessed, no, there's another level of imposter syndrome there as well. But even when you're diagnosed, like I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until much later. And even when you're diagnosed, you realize that there's a spectrum and you understand now, obviously so much more than we understood as kids or when we started to build these foundational kind of baseline thought processes and adaptations and coping mechanisms and all these things. And you know now, like all of so much more than we knew then, but you still have this, am I really autistic? Am I really ADHD? Or am I enough? Am I autistic enough or ADHD enough to even be talking about this or complaining about this? And generally those thoughts tend to come because of a process that most of us kind of go through in life. And it's not all that different from neurotypical or holistic people. How you learn things and you get better at things and you adjust to things and you adapt to things and you figure out the things that work and the things that don't. And you kind of shape the your face that you show the world. You shape your identity and your presentation that you show the world, but it's based on competence. It's based on showing you're enough. It's based on showing that you can do what you need to do, but it completely hides the struggle. And, you know, it's a different time. I grew up in a different time, but it really like in the 80s and 90s, hiding the struggle, whether you were male or female, like that was kind of part of your thing. You were supposed to be tough. You were supposed to, you weren't encouraged to talk about things nearly as often, nearly as much as people are encouraged to talk about things today, which is great. I get to have open conversations with my children about some of the challenges that they may possess that, overlap with mine, and that's wonderful, but that wasn't a thing I had with my father, and that might have been helpful, but it wasn't because of him, it was because that's just the world we lived in. People didn't talk about it. Again, this is a time when they didn't even know you could have autism and ADHD at the same time. That's only a fairly recent development, but I digress. Let me come back here. So, talking about, imposter syndrome. So you gotta deal with the face you put onto the world voluntarily, and eventually, you gotta keep this in mind, when you are masking enough, it's not so much voluntary anymore. Voluntarily, it's a thing that you just do. It's a script, it's an automatic, you know, response, and it becomes clouded with all the other automatic responses, and you kind of become a conglomeration of all of your scripts, basically, and all of the faces that you put on to show the world, while deep down inside, you realize it to some degree, and then some days in much greater degrees, and that's generally when the imposter syndrome feeling really hits hard, and you're like, "Well, who am I? Am I fake? What is like, am I like, no wonder I can't figure out anything. I don't even have any clue who I am." And we think as people on the spectrum have a tendency to over ruminate. This rumination is thinking and thinking and thinking on something that to well beyond a point where it's healthy, you start to think that it's a problem that not everybody has. But in reality, this is a problem that everybody to some extent has. Like, what mask are you going to wear today? What mask are you going to wear in the next 5 minutes? Like during a meeting, you can't just walk into a meeting with a client when you know they're rude, you know they're angry, you know they're going to say some things. You can't just say anything you want to say. You put on the mask you need to put on in order to play the role you need to play to make today the, best day it can be for you or for your company or for whoever you're, whatever you're working towards. And so this competence, or hide all these things, we hide all the struggle, and eventually we kind of build this badge of resilience, and we hide behind it because it lets you reframe hiding as being brave and being strong and being resilient and being the rock and being there for everybody. But you can't do that. That's not sustainable. That's not something you can keep up, and it will fall. And when it falls, what is not likely to happen is that regardless of what you think you deserve, people are not likely to be like, "Oh my god, you've been so strong for so long, I can't believe it." They're gonna be like, "Well, why are you changing all of a sudden and dumping all this on me?" And it's true, you are kinda dumping it on them, like, if you're being honest with yourself, Kirby, that's my tree. Um, if you're being honest with yourself, like, you gotta see where they're coming from. You've been doing a certain thing, and they may have been taking advantage of it, maybe unintentionally, maybe entirely unintentionally, because it just seemed like a good dynamic that worked for everybody. But you have to speak up. You have to say, "This is how I feel. This is what's been going on. This is what's happening." Because if you wait until you have no choice, you're going to be way beyond your best self. You're gonna be well outside of your center, and you're going to be speaking from a place of it depends on you, but maybe it's desperation, maybe it's anger, maybe it's frustration. Regardless, it's gonna be a place that's gonna have a lot of anxiety, and it's gonna have a lot of stress involved, and it's gonna be harder than it needs to be because you waited too long to just be honest and transparent. And I am very much a hypocrite in this sense. Like this is me coming from a place of learning the hard way. So I am now at a point where that's a lot of what this channel is about is me being as transparent as possible, being as open as possible, and just forcing myself into a life that is me and not a combination mashup of all of the me's people need me to be on any given day, week, month, whatever. So let's again, let's pull it back in and talk again about the about imposter syndrome. So what you have to do in order to try to break this cycle of just constantly being a people pleaser is you have to put some intention into assessing yourself and the things that bring you joy. Now, a lot of us have probably been doing this to some extent. You have hobbies, you have things that you like, but you have to really dig deep into things that give you energy because it's not just about what you like. If we all just did what we like, then if that's all it took, it would be so easy. But it's not just that. It's about doing the things you like and balancing with the things you have to do and really adjusting those things to bring them closer in alignment with each other because you can build a life that is, mostly enjoyable with only a handful of responsibilities or friction points, but it takes some real intentional assessment and reassessment and action and structure. You have to have structure. If you just wake up and say, "Well, let's see what I'm going to do today," and you don't have something planned out, your day is not likely to be nearly as productive as you hope, or at least not in any way that's reliable. You may be able to have like, I'll be honest, some days I can just crank out enough work that'll just outdo an entire week in a single day, but those are rare. And those are usually a result of all sorts of days of me being structured. And then boom, breakthrough day happens and I just run and it's exhausting. Generally those days lead to something that's similar to burnout, but much shorter term. It's just a complete exhaustion and I hit a wall but I wake up the next day and I can keep going because it's not burnout for I found when I overexert myself for myself and for the things I'm energetic and passionate about, I tend to have a quicker recovery than when I force myself to overexert for requirements for other people. And usually that's because of procrastination and I just have to get it done. Those usually have a much longer recovery time. So I always lean into following my energy, but there's like I said, there's always a pull. There's always another side to that, and you got to keep that in mind. But when you're dealing with for those that are dealing with a late diagnosis, if you were diagnosed, even if you were self-assessed, and you've done your research and you have significant evidence and personal history and all sorts of things to just be like, okay, this is a side of me that I need to further explore. You don't have to label it. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You do need to try to intentionally give yourself some grace because you will be reframing things that you hadn't thought of in a long, long time. It's just bound to happen. You start to you investigate your timeline, your history, and you're like, okay, this makes sense now, but now this is a little confusing and this and that. And it is not going to show up as some clear picture. It's not going to be, oh, I woke up today, or I mean, sorry, woke up. It's not going to be, oh, I started writing down my timeline, and it's like, oh, everything says 100% ADHD or everything says you're autistic. No, it's going to be like, it seems like a lot of the stuff points towards autism, but at the same time, how did I play baseball for so many years with no problem? How did I do this? How did there's things that are not going to make sense. There's things that are going to be like, well, okay. And that's generally where the roots of imposter syndrome kind of tend to find their way in is these cracks where you're like, okay, I'm autistic, I'm autistic, I'm autistic. And then it's like, oh, I can talk for 35 minutes about this. You have to reframe those things because you're going to need to unpack some stuff. And you probably will benefit from a little bit of therapy, whatever version that is for you. Um, because it's a big change, and your brain is not used to seeing you in that way. Your brain doesn't say, "This is me. I am autistic. I'm ADHD." Like, not right away. It takes some reframing, and it takes some grace with yourself and some gentleness because really, there are gonna be plenty of opportunities to just for self-hate, for anger, for, like, you're gonna be mourning the past in many ways. You c there's a lot to process, and you've gotta take it as it comes and embrace it because it is all part of this, package that is going to create a whole you, a full, complete version of you that allows your days to just be better and better. But again, it's gonna take intentionality, it's gonna take assessment, a self-assessment, it's going to take doing the hard things, but they get easier every day. They get your center, your safe core, the things that become part of your comfort zone grow every day if you're intentional. If you intentionally kind of push your learning, push your boundaries, push your comfort zone, the comfort zone grows. And you just keep leaning into that. And the same will happen with any of the imposter syndrome stuff. As you realize and you adapt, like you will be validating all of this because you'll see, wow, wearing sunglasses in the grocery store really does make a difference later on in the day. Like for me, everything's like a gauge. And if I do some things and adapt to or implement some adaptations earlier in the day, I have bandwidth left at the end of the day. If I don't, I'm generally going to pay for it. And that's how you have to look at it. But like I said, every time one of those adaptations clicks and you notice how much it helps, it will help to reduce the imposter syndrome because you will know, like, this worked for other people, and that's why and watch lots of YouTube videos, and whatever your, social media is, but, like, watch lots of videos of people talking about their experience because you will see, yes, you'll be, like, literally talking to yourself, "Yes, yes, that is me," and, it'll help, and there's a community out there. This is something I wish I'd found years ago because I wouldn't have hidden things for so long. I wouldn't have hidden my autism for so long. I didn't know about the ADHD or the ADHD stuff until later in life, but the autism I hid because these resources sources weren't available. I didn't know that there was a community of people like me. I kind of envisioned the special education department that was nearby the gifted room where I did a lot of school, and um, I knew that wasn't where I wanted to be, and I let that kind of drive everything. And it's not like that anymore. So look for people who are sharing their stories. Look for things that they can tell you that you hear them and see what resonates because things will resonate, and every time it does, you will feel a little bit more like you and a little bit less like an imposter. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it there because I think that we could talk for years and years, and everybody that's on the spectrum has a very different experience. Nobody's the same. No two people are the same, but we're all trying to kind of figure things out. So this rabbit hole can go very, very deep, but I will say just have some grace with yourself and go forward in the most honest and open way you can, accepting that some of the things you have to embrace about yourself are things that you never thought of, never considered. But some of those things are going to be incredibly beautiful. They're going to add to your journey and they're going to bring so much richness to your life because you've opened the door to them. And to me, that's kind of been the key to finding contentment and joy and happiness is just being open to what the world is telling you, and not in like a woo woo way, like, but like being open to what's in front of you and what happens in front of you every day and what works for you, and that turning that data and that research and that experience into a better tomorrow. So with that, enjoy the day.